what would you say is the difference in the culture, the local culture of, say, the 70s and 80s, like when we were kids, to now? In other words, what is the difference? How do you feel that folks relate to each other? Is it in is is there a difference in attitude in the way that people approach each other?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So that's a great question, by the way. And here's how I would describe that. Like in the 70s and 80s, and even in the 90s, there were so many locals around that you could afford to disagree with locals to the point where you'd make enemies and you'd fight with locals. And locals would fight in the newspapers with letters to the editor. They'd fight at political meetings. They'd fight at, in front of the post office. But I'm finding today that there are so few locals left. When I see a local who I know on the streets, I love them. I mean, it's just, I'm so glad to see them, and in that sense, the locals have become a lot tighter, and it's sort of more of a us against them attitude, rather than in the old days when we took each other for granted. It was me against you on this issue, but then that could flip, and we'd be allies on the next issue. But it's just there's so few locals, and the community has shrunk to the point where I think the locals who are still here are much closer than probably the massive amount of locals from years past, which is kind of ironic, and it's a good thing, but it's very different, and the reason why it's happening is not really great. That's kind of sad that we're just whittling down, and we got each other's backs now.
Well, I got a question too. Who are the Aspen characters from the past that you think we should remember? I mean, Ralph Jackson was obviously a crazy character, and Georgia Lighton was kind of a crazy, interesting person. And then we had, Jimmy Buffett and John Denver and folks like that were pretty much locals early on.
You go back to the old school, you got Freddie the Fixer too.
Freddie Fisher the Fixer,
yeah. So who can you think of that like we should remember as those characters, the Aspen characters?
Man, we have so many of them, good and bad, and Hunter Thompson, obviously he's sort of an icon for the hippie movement in Aspen when they were actually started trying to save it from overdevelopment, which is a pretty laudable goal from a guy who's sort of half crazy. That's the thing. We had Joe Candry and Puppy Smith and Ted Armstrong, who I mentioned, with the recreation department director. It's people like that. There were so many characters in Aspen that they didn't really stand out, and you could almost tell a local because they were sort of crazy. And so today it's hard to think of any characters really, but in the old days there were so many characters, they just all blended in, and you didn't really stand out until you died.
Well, remember the crazy guy who wanted to build the
Hans
Yeah.
Grauminger. Yeah, I remember that.
Grauminger. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
He wanted to build that restaurant up on the tip of Shadow Mountain.
Yep.
And my dad knew Hans really well, and I grew up in a house over at the base of that mountain as a young kid, so I got to know him. And when we were in high school, I don't know if you guys remember, he built a tram up there.
I do, yeah.
It was just a very crude, rudimentary machine that, it was a small chairlift that you could go up there. And he told us one day, he said, you guys come next week and bring your ski gear, and you guys, I'll get you on this. I'll get you on my tram and take you up to the top of Shadow Mountain, and you can ski down. And that's just like riding on a board tied to a cable with ropes. But we went home and we were getting ready to do this, and my dad asked us what we were doing, and we told him, and he just about hit the ceiling. He said, you cannot, number one, ride up that tram. You'll probably die there, and if you don't die there, you'll get caught in an avalanche skiing Shadow Mountain. So that big adventure never happened. And honestly, like 3 weeks later, a big spring avalanche came down that you can't see it so much anymore, but it was like a lift line there on Shadow Mountain. An avalanche came down there and it knocked down Hans's barn, including the tram, bull wheel, and all that stuff. So yeah, we were lucky my dad saved us from that great adventure. But he was a character. He was over there, right? He had a little office right over there across from the Hickory house.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so let's see. Who else is there?
Well, there's Benny the Blade. He's sort of a modern nut that everybody knows, but he's not around anymore either. I ran into him. I was just walking on the boardwalk out in anywhere, so one of the beaches in Los Angeles, and I walked by this guy with a friend of mine, and I saw who I thought was Benny the Blade sitting on a bench in his rollerblades there, and I thought, that's not him. And we turned around a little while later and we came back, and sure enough, he was sitting there and it was Benny. And I said, "Hey, Benny." And he goes, "Roger." And my friend who lives in LA goes, "You guys know each other?" Because, Benny's a character, and he looks...
Was that like Santa Monica or somewhere? Or?
Yes, it was Santa Monica. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Santa Monica. Yeah, that was right next to the pier. So we saw Benny the Blade out there. So who else? I mean, geez, there's so many of them. Yeah.
Stein Eriksen.
No, Stein Eriksen. Yeah, Leif Eriksen. He was an actor.
Yeah. Well, that's another thing too. We had some crazy locals. I mean, remember when we first moved in, it was either the Sonny and Cher house, which was down at the bottom of Cemetery Lane there.
Yeah.
Or up on the golf course, And I feel like there was back then there was still folks. Barbie Benton was a local.
Oh, sure. Yeah, there were.
One of the funniest things I remember working at this supermarket, a buddy of mine. He was bagging, and Cher was coming through the line, and the tabloid of the day was Cher's botched breast job. and she was staring at that tabloid, and my friend was just like, "Oh my God."
That would have been a good picture.
Yeah. She was none too happy, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Yeah, I used to see Cher walking around town all the time with Greg Allman a lot of times.
Yeah.
You remember Jack Nicholson? I think he still has a house here. Of course, John Denver.
I thought I read he sold it recently, like the last couple of years.
Well, it wouldn't surprise me. I think he's getting on in age, and the stars, they were here, and they blended in pretty well. Glenn Fry, he sponsored a softball team, the Werewolves, and Jimmy Buffett had the Down Valley Doughboys.
And they both didn't they both play softball on the Aspen State Teachers College team? Him and John Denver. I thought they.
Yeah, maybe they did. I know Jimmy Buffett had his own team. And he pitched for him sometimes. I was umpiring games, and those guys, they were crazy. And it just they didn't act like celebrities, and you wouldn't have picked them out like celebrities.
No, actually, it was like the joiners table. It was you're just eating, drinking, hanging out, talking about just normal stuff. And it felt to me more like, again, back then, people came to Aspen to mix in, not to
for sure
be the star.
No question about it. Yeah, I don't know if anybody goes anywhere to blend in anymore. That's a cultural shift too, I think, with social media and whatnot. Everybody's trying to stand out, posting the spectacular post, or everybody, it's a competition.
Feeding the bears. I heard about that.
Oh yeah.
One of my fondest memories, actually kind of with your family as well, was with the St. Patty's Day dinners that we had over at the church. Those were awesome. With John Kelleher and all those guys in the kitchen. It's a blast.
And it was a community event. It wasn't just for the Catholic Church. I mean, it was people would see the line to get into that event every St. Patrick's Day, and it would wrap around the corner and go halfway around the block, and that just drew more people into it. And nobody minded waiting, because they'd come by with pitchers of beer, and you saw people you knew, and man, that was a great event. That was a great event, and we're trying to resurrect that. By the way, it went away a little bit during COVID, but now there's so much competition with every bar in town. You know, St. Patrick's Day has become quite a holiday on its own right, and so people don't depend on just one community event anymore. So the St. Patty's Day at St. Mary still goes on, but it's not the main event. But it used to be the main event going on in town.
Well, you know, it's funny being out here in the South with barbecue as being a huge thing, and I love Southern barbecue. I mean, it's good stuff. But I always remember, and I don't remember if it was at the St. Patty's Day, because that probably would have been corned beef or whatever.
Yeah,
It was spaghetti nights, and then they always did this. There was somebody out there that used to cook barbecue beef, and you know, we got so used to it. Every time we'd go to like an Eagles Club thing or whatever it was like, oh no, not barbecue beef again. And now I'm like, I'm trying my best to find the closest thing to that, and the closest I've come is like a Kansas City barbecue sauce or something, and yeah, I totally missed
a little bit sweet.
It might, yeah, exactly, and it might have been Kelleher or somebody, whoever it was.
Well, the Shaft used to be a pretty good barbecue.
Oh yeah, the Shaft was fun. No windows, just walls that looked like rocks.
You were in a shaft.
You know,
and the mining pans for the salad.
You know, we used to love going to the Shaft as kids, just because it was kind of like a Disneyland ride or something. But,
yeah.
You know, later when I got older, I came to realize that they ran a lot of drugs through that place too. So they were selling more than rent.
Well, I think the pizza shop was kind of known for that, right?
No, yeah, I think every place in town was kind of known for that.
Hey, so, you know, interesting folklore, and maybe you can sort of give us sort of the paper version of it. The hunter becoming sheriff and Salamander.
Yeah. Well, that was Chris Cassette was Salamander. He had the cartoon in the Aspen Times.
But
and if you remember him,
one year he run for mayor.
Yeah, well, Salamander ran for mayor. He was a cartoon character. Yeah. So had he won, I don't know what they would have done, but that would have been pretty cool if he did win. But yeah,
I heard it was close, kind of like Hunter Thompson.
Yeah. So, you know, if Sal ran today, he'd probably win. Although I love our mayor Tory, he's a good guy. He's a character. You talk about characters. He is one of the last characters in town. And you know, part of my definition of a character would be someone who's not trying to be, and he's not trying to be, but he is, because he's just who he is, and he's very comfortable with who he is, and so there's no pretense with him, and that's when the character comes out, when you see the real part of anybody. So yeah, so hats off to Mayor Tory.
I think now that you mention that, I think I want to say that Bill Sterling was at our book signing too.
Oh yeah, he's a character.
Yeah. Speaking of old mayors.
But you know, yeah, and your book signing was cool. That was a local event, and you know, I remember the place was packed. I was standing in the back. I couldn't even see you guys because I was around the corner. I could hear you. But the people I saw there, and just the joy in their eyes, and you know, the questions they were asking and the way you guys were answering them, that was a love fest, man. And that's a rare thing where
that was cool.
Where people just show up because of who you are and what your experiences were here, and you know, just for the joy of it. So that was, congratulations to you guys, and I hope you're killing it with that book, because that's a good book.
I think I caught a sight of you in one of the pictures that somebody had. I was like, "There's Roger. He's standing." I think you were standing right behind Bill Sterling. Actually.
Yeah, I was. Now that you mention, I was near Bill there.
I felt like, for me, Roger, I felt like that moment made me realize that we actually did something really cool.
You did something.
I mean, I felt like we did something fun, but it didn't feel like it was really cool when that happened like that, and people were standing out the windows and down below the open windows and everywhere, and it made me feel like, you know what, we really did pull the community together in this book.
You did, and people, you can just tell how hungry people are for that. It's just such a feel-good thing. So